I didn't speak publicly after the Cocopelli fire, but I talked to the Forest Service and they said we're going to take care of it. You remember the one over here that scared the daylights out of us and we thought we were going to lose the town then. I didn't speak publicly after the Pippin fire, which burned about 60,000 acres over on Capitan Mountain. I spoke to the Forest Service afterward and they said we're going to do something about it. I didn't say anything after the Scott Abel fire. And you all know that tree that stood out there between the Highline wires for several years, and the county commission, the rural co-op was asking permission to cut the tree down. And it was refused on environmental grounds. You can't go in and take that tree out. And that tree fell into a line, into an electrical line, and began a fire that burned homes. We lost a life in that fire. Understand that I didn't speak the first few times. I didn't speak 2 weeks before when I was out in the Gila and found that small fire was allowed to burn. And then it got out of control and has now burned 300,000 acres. I didn't speak that day. I was in Albuquerque on Saturday when this fire began to burn out of control. I began to get the calls from people here in this community, and our staff was getting the calls and they're coming in. I changed my schedule and said I've got to go to Ruidoso. And on the way down here, as I fielded those calls of insistence, why? Why was this quarter-acre fire not tended to? Why was it allowed to burn for 4 days under 4 acres? And why was it not tended to? And I felt like at that point it was my responsibility to speak up, that I have a requirement to speak for you who are asking those questions. You all saw the head of the Forest Service, Tom Tidwell, come to this town on Sunday. Was that last week or 2 weeks ago?
Father's Day.
You saw that his boss, the Secretary of Agriculture, came. I thought they were going to come and listen to people who had lost their homes. I thought they were going to come and express regrets. And instead, they came in for a photo op. And they went back to Albuquerque and did a press conference up there. I was infuriated that our public officials would not lower themselves to come and speak to the people who have lost everything. People like Lynette, people like Jack. Just give them an ear. Allow them to speak. So we called an impromptu town hall and allowed these people to speak. And you saw that coverage last week on the KOB News. And give KOB a round of applause. They keep showing up here. They keep being a voice. Understand which of the TV stations is giving voice to us. Because it's only when we speak up and our voices carry across this nation that people begin to change their mind. Jack said it well. We're all environmentalists. We want the forest. We don't want to see the destruction that's going on. We don't want to see it clear cut, but we do want to see it managed to where we don't live like this any longer. And know that on that Sunday, in the briefing to the Secretary of Agriculture and to the head of the U.S. Forest Service, that the team leader here, the incident team leader, said that Ruidoso was greatly at risk for days. Greatly at risk. You were, the whole town, not just the 242 homes we lost. So know that if we don't change policy, that great risk still lives right up that canyon, Upper Canyon, right here on the hills that have not burned. Know that nothing has changed. And know that the Forest Service will give more words of compliance, and they will tell us that they're going to do something. But understand, they've done this nationwide. My frustration is the frustration that Democrats feel when they called for a congressional hearing in Los Angeles after that station fire. The most expensive fire in the nation's history, $100 million. And they called for a congressional field investigation. And they did it. And the Forest Service just gently sidestepped them. So they went back to Washington and called for a GAO study. And the Forest Service quietly brushed them aside. Senator Feinstein, who's not a conservative, came out and said, something is wrong here. We've got to consider changing. And they swept her gently aside. My friends, they're going to sweep us gently aside till we stand up and make our voices heard. Know that you have an exceptional thing.
We're going to stand up and be heard.
Be heard. Yes, we'll be heard. We will be heard. Know that you've got something special happening here today. The number of elected officials who will come up here in front and talk to you about what they've done. Our founding fathers thought it that way. They put the states in charge of these kinds of things. They never approved for the federal government to run the forest. That was taken over in the early 1900s. It was our founding fathers believed the states should run these deals because you heard your county commissioner, we passed this, we passed that, we passed that. Instantaneous responses. And what have you gotten out of Washington? You haven't even gotten an apology. You haven't even gotten an admission that something might be wrong. They're defending, they're huddled up, they're protecting themselves. As we raised our voices, retirees from the Forest Service have started coming to us nationwide. People who have spent their life in the Forest Service, but also spent decades investigating fires. They are specialists, and they're saying, Congressman Pearce, you are right. The Forest Service has developed policies that allow them to stand back and let the fires burn so that we can introduce fire back into the wild. Those are the comments by Tom Tidwell, the chief of the Forest Service. He's a nice guy, but he's misguided. The retirees say he's playing Russian roulette with our lives and with our forest. It's that kind of belief that the culture overpowers the local people who know what to do. I'm not speaking against local foresters, local firefighters. God bless the firefighters. Give them a round of applause. Thank them for being here, for stopping the destruction. I'm speaking about those policies that say that we want fire to accomplish its objectives in our forest. Know that on May the 17th, that fire out west was only about 700 acres. And the public release that I pulled down, printed off, and showed to Tom Tidwell in my office said that the fire is achieving its management objectives. And we are monitoring it. A couple of days later, it blew out of control and is now 300,000 acres. It's that kind of mindset that controls the actions of the people here. I brought up with Mr. Tidwell when he's visiting in my office, and I promised that when he was here that Sunday, we're going to visit in my office. We sat for almost 2 hours. I give him that. I asked him about a term, WFU, wildfire use. I said, is that a policy of the Forest Service? Well, he hedged a little bit. Well, it used to be a term we used, that we do use wildfire. Now they use terms like monitoring, confining. Those are terms saying that we're going to stand back and let those fires go like this 4-acre fire did. And so our question is very simple. It comes to us from the investigators saying, here's the question you want to ask. Do you really intend to put out the fire today? Or are you standing back, letting it creep around and achieve objectives that you, the Forest Service, think it should achieve, and then you're going to pounce on it when it gets out of control? Because they say that's the question. If the professionals say it, then that's the question we're asking. Because we here in Ruidoso, we here in New Mexico have a right to ask. We've got the damages to show it. We've got the loss to show it. I did not go to Washington to fight. But I will tell you, I have spent the entire time fighting because I committed when I went that if you're in a fight, I'm going to be in the fight with you. If you're out there on the front lines of a battle saying that the government is too strong, too powerful, and taking your freedoms or taking your property, I'm going to be in the fight with you. That is our commitment, and we're standing by that commitment. You heard the mayor of Alamogordo say that the drinking water system that provides 15 or 20% of their water is gone. Will not be usable for 6, 8, 10 years, will cost millions to the city. We just saw a report today that came to me, Los Angeles Times. I mentioned the station fire. A court just found today or yesterday that the government's responsible for $28 million in local costs. What about the local costs here? Is the government going to pay for those? Those are questions that we have a right to ask. Local elected officials have the right to ask that. What about our tax base that's been decimated? Are you going to help us? Are you going to help us balance the books? I will tell you my experience down in the Carlsbad Caverns area where it was a forest fire and a national park fire is that we had to go all out just to get some fences rebuilt. Ranchers, herds were walking around because of backfires set to stop the fire, burn fires. They said, hey, you can't burn my fence. the firefighting personnel said, we got lots of money, don't worry about it, your fence will be rebuilt. And months later, we had to go into an all-out struggle to get a fence rebuilt. What about the people who've lost homes now and lost everything they own? I will tell you that it is time for us, the people, to begin to speak. You heard Greg Nybert talk about that lizard. Now, not many of you watch it because you're not over there. It was just a southeast part of the New Mexico issue. Just they were going to list a little lizard as endangered. But it had the chance of killing the industry there, the oil and gas, that nuclear enrichment facility. It had the chance to kill that industry the same as your timber industry got killed here by the spotted owl. Now, no one said anything nationwide when the spotted owl was listed as endangered. No one said anything out in the San Joaquin Valley when they put 23,000 farmers out of work over a 2-inch delta smelt, a small minnow that's in the river. A minnow that we could have bred in the millions in holding ponds next to the river and put them in when we want them to. But the extremists say that's not good enough. They say it doesn't count if it's not bred in the wild. And so they put those 23,000 farmers out of work. It killed the San Joaquin Valley. That's where America, all of America, got 80% of the vegetables. So now you get vegetables that come from China and from South America, where they spray things that we don't allow in this country. So your food safe is less supply, the jobs have been killed, and the economy is less vital. It's more stagnant. We wonder why there's 8% unemployment. It's because we've killed industries one at a time, the timber industry, the logging industry, and now then they were trying to kill the oil and gas industry with this little lizard. But it was when people began to speak on the streets. That's when the issue began to turn. Because Washington does listen when people on the streets begin to talk. They're constantly polls running, they're checking the pulses. And if people are just complacent, they're sitting back, they're going to continue to do the same things. But when I see your elected officials get up here and say, quietly and respectfully, we're going to take our land back, then I believe it's going to happen. I believe that we have success looking at us because I think that we're in a fight that the federal government does not know that it's in. They're beginning to pay attention. You remember that day I asked the questions here that Saturday afternoon? They told me we couldn't fight that fire when it was 4 acres because it was 10,000 feet. And our helicopters won't fly that high. Do you know that they just put out a fire at Magdalena Ridge? They put it out because they had helicopters flying all the time. Slurry bombers and helicopters, one dropping water, one dropping slurry, because they didn't want that fire to burn out of control. They got on it the way they could have gotten on this fire, and they doused everything in the region. That fire went out in a matter of days, because that's the way they should fight it. I asked Mr. Tidwell if there was ever a policy in the Forest Service about the 10 a.m. rule. He said yes. The 10 a.m. rule, for those of you who don't know, and I didn't know until these Forest Service specialists have been calling from around the country, said, ask them about the 10 a.m. rule. So I asked. He said, yeah, that was the idea that if fire starts, that we're going to get it out by 10 a.m. tomorrow. And I said, well, what about that rule? He said, well, it was too successful. We stopped it. It was too successful, so we stopped it. I can understand that you wouldn't want to put a fire out during the wet season, that you would want it to burn some of the underbrush, but I cannot fathom the mindset in our top forester that says it was too successful. We didn't want to use the 10 a.m. policy there in Ruidoso. We didn't want to use it up in Colorado where they've killed one person and burned 346 houses in one fire and over 200 in another. You've seen the Air Force Academy almost burned to the ground because of our policies up there. And they're looking at 65-mile-an-hour winds today for the next 5 or 6 days and 108-degree temperatures, and that fire is expected to spread and jump the way it has been on TV. So know that it's not just us, but know that in New Mexico we're one of the few areas that are standing up. Gathering like this that is going on in the nation, so God bless you all for being out here. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. You saw Mike Skidmore, and he stood up over there at the roadless rules in the Gila. We marched with the Catholics when they began to encroach on their freedom of religion. We stood up on the lizard. We started that tree-cutting party down at Cloudcroft. We participated in that. And all of these were just gentle ways of getting people to march in the streets to say to our government, please, think about it differently. Come at it from a different idea. What you're doing is not working. Those have been respectful and disrespectful. We appreciate the dedicated public servants. We appreciate the firefighters, but we are wholeheartedly against the policy and the policy makers who turn a blind eye. Turn the forest back to us and we'll manage it. Turn the forest back to local people and they will not let this happen. We're not going to clear cut these hills. We're simply going to manage to where we can live in harmony with nature. That's all we're saying. It's a noble request. It's the request our founding fathers had in mind. We the people, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We're now coming alive to the fact that we have forgotten by the people. We've all been complacent. I was complacent my whole life until running for public office, and now I've gotten stirred deeply that our liberty is at stake. But you all are just as important. You all are, in fact, more important. It's the voices on the street. It's the voices on the radio. It's the voices at the coffee shop. That's where we begin to change the heart of America. And the heart of America is changing. They're listening for these common sense sounds, like our mayor from Alamogordo, like our state representative, like our county chairman. They're listening for those voices. They're tired of the voices from Washington, frankly. They're looking for voices of people who have lost and people who see a different way to manage things. They're listening for voices like Jack's, who are coming here with both points of view, that we can live in harmony with nature, that we can do both. We can preserve the environment, we can preserve jobs, and we can live in the forest. We can do all, and we are going to do all because you're here today. You're the group, you're the core group that's going to carry this message out into the community. Your friends will know that you are here today. They will want your input. So compel them to be active. Compel them. What they must understand about this. Let your families know. Let the people at church know. You know, the visions of our freedom were preached from the pulpits 50 years before the Revolution. The idea of no taxation without representation didn't begin in some halls of liberty, in some party of Republican, Democrat, Whigs, or Tories, or what that. It was preached from the pulpits. So compel your ministers to begin to get back on the ideas of liberty that come from God, not from man, not from government, from our Creator. That's where we get our liberties. Begin to have our pastors take those stances, because that's where liberty is going to breathe again. We're in perilous times in the nation, but I every day have a sense of belief in the future, because I see these gatherings everywhere in New Mexico. And then I get to Washington and I hear county commissioners come up from other parts of the country and they say, what do y'all got going on in New Mexico? We want something of that. We want sheriffs who will be bold and defend the law for local governments and tell the federal government to back up and let us implement the laws here. We want county commissions who are bold and say that we're going to start implementing forest management processes. We want a state that will pass Senate Bill 1 that says we'll take over if you don't take charge. They want some of what you got, and all you have is a boldness and a courage to speak up about your God-given freedoms. Keep it up. God bless you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.